People love scary stories. It's just human nature, and they love them even more if the stories might possibly spike the price of gold and silver. But what happens if those stories don't come true? Do the prices still go up? And if they do, what kind of story is that? So there's a phenomenon. Maybe that's too big of a word. There's a thing that hits me on the topic of gold and silver, and it's how much attention is given to the negative. Now, we don't need to drive into examples here because I don't really want to add to it, but I'm talking about tuning into bad news or people's versions of bad news that could possibly send the price of gold and silver up. That's one. I'm also talking about zeroing in on performance expectations for both metals, expectations that probably aren't being met, and then the strangest of all of them, just paying attention to any negative story some channel puts out, knowing that negative gets the views. I mean, crowds love a good story of somebody getting screwed. Statistics tell us so. But what do all those stories have to do with gold and silver? Well, I would say not a whole lot. So let's see if we can clear up the picture a little bit and start by taking a look at where gold is at so far this year. And that part's pretty easy. We'll get a chart up here. Gold started the year right around $1,820. That's $1,820. Now, currently, we're looking at around $1,935 at the time of this recording. So that's a gain of 6.3%. That's pretty good. In an average year, I'll take a 6.3% gain. That means that I'm ahead of my typical premium cost on a 1 ounce gold coin inside of about a year. And I'm definitely ahead of that 4% buy to sell spread, and even less time if I went to sell that coin. So that's just a baseline for performance right now. Where we're going to start from here, if we were to look back further, go back 20 years, well, the average annual gain on gold has been higher than that. The average over the past 20 years is 8.7%. If we look back over the past 50 years, the average is 7.8%. Now we see up years, we see flat years, but like I said, I'll happily take a 6.3% gain like we've seen so far in 2023. Now, if we'd pulled the room prior to throwing out the 6.3% number, well, most of us would have said that this stuff isn't really doing much this year. Some might have said it's trending down. Why? Well, let's take a look at a chart again. If we look at May of this year, gold was testing new all-time highs, and that's great, but those are levels that I'm watching from the sidelines. I'd rather be buying from the trenches, and right now, a trench is still up 6.3% on the year. Now, if we polled the people in the room who aren't in the United States, not buying gold in USD, we would get an even different reaction because gold is on a run in a lot of other currencies. I've mentioned this before, but if you back up to 2022 when gold only went up about 0.5% in the United States in USD, well, in Turkey it went up 41.5%. And that's because gold is dollar denominated. And I'm oversimplifying here a little bit, but the exchange rate for USD is particularly high right now, and that means that gold in other currencies is also high. So that's a look at where gold is at for the year. Now let's look at where it's going. Now this part is harder. I'm making this video the day before Punxsutawney Phil pokes his head up, tells us if he sees a shadow, lets us know if the Fed is still exercising caution. Okay, it's actually Jerome Powell. He's the one who can talk, and he's going to give us some words tomorrow about upcoming Fed policy. And those words tell us how the US dollar is going to fare, and that tells us a little bit more about where gold price is going. I said a little bit more because, like I mentioned in my last video, gold price is no longer on the edge of its seat waiting for Fed rate decisions because inflation is no longer the only headline in play. So the Fed's continued cautionary stance is no longer news. What we're looking at now is more about typical market conditions, things like consumer confidence or how other economies are doing relative to the US. Because if another economy is up, well, that could be bearish for the US dollar index. And if we see a dip in the Dixie, well, we see a bump in gold prices, typically. So the prices are going back to normal measures rather than taking the major cues from Fed policy. So still, so what? Well, I started out mentioning that we like to dwell on negatives, or at least that's the popular topic in the space. Well, gold is not having a negative year. It doesn't need negative events to push the price up. And those doom stories, they continue to evolve because the made up parts are proving to be just that. Now, none of that's new. That's been that way for decades. It's probably been that way forever. But in that light, even without a catastrophe or some shadow organization coming for your gold, we're seeing pretty solid performance. Now, add to that at some point in the near future, we are going to see headlines from the Fed that are relevant to the price of gold. First, they're going to explain a decision for a pause. That's going to push the price of gold up. And then we're going to see an actual rate reversal, and that will be even more positive for the price of gold. So maybe we'll see some volatility, and that will make us all think that gold is actually doing something again. But really, I don't expect much in the way of surprises from the Fed. And no surprises means no rate increase, and no rate increase gives a pretty solid path for gold on its way up. Now, maybe not exciting enough path to replace the popular doom stories we have around here, but who knows? So let's call it good there. Let us know in the comments if you've been buying much this year, if you're caught up in the stories of doom, or maybe you're just bored a little bit from the relative lag of metals prices. Now, that lag is probably more about simple comparisons to expectations, like I just mentioned, but let us know what you think. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.